So if I zoom into this first one, like you can see, we have just a standard 50 by 100 plot. We have about 50 feet here, and then we have 100 feet here. That is 15 meters by 30 meters. So you can see in this one, we literally have a parking for about 4 cars. We have a good compound, and we have fairly enough space at the back. Then going to the last example, you see things get even worse and worse. The square footage is actually the same, but the shape of the land has changed a lot, so we cannot have a lot of functional parking area and basically things like that. You can see we have literally a lot of space at the back of the plot, but there's not much you can do with it. You can't literally even put a house here for the maids or something, you know, because everything is literally irregular. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to this channel that's all about architecture, engineering and construction, and this is also all about bettering the African narrative. You know, several years ago, you know, when I used to move around and see different houses here and there, you know, some houses have cracks, some houses are really looking basic, some houses have basically just like how you move around into houses having a lot of issues. Yeah, so I used to judge people, I used to judge owners for always opting for cheap things, or for opting for cheap work, or for looking for cheap services, you know. But then after some time, as I moved on forward and forward, I began to judge people less and less, because I realized that some people make decisions, some people, when it comes to building, people have their houses built and they make decisions along the way, not based on the fact that they want cheap things, but they just are not informed enough. They do not have enough and fairly accurate information about construction, about the broadness of all these things in the construction and the industry. So I think that it is our role as architects and engineers in this industry to avail as much information as possible in its broadness, in its accuracy, for as much as we know, so that by the time people make decisions out there regarding their construction, they have enough information on which they can base to make proper decisions, at least from what they know at that time. Okay, so that is the reason why we decided to come up with this series. We're actually coming up with a series where we're going to be discussing all the necessary information that you need to know, at least when you're going to start on your construction project, when you're going to embark on your construction project. That is literally from every step of construction, okay, from choosing the land, that is also building, from getting the architecture designs ready, the structure designs ready, the mechanical, electrical and plumbing drawings ready, and basically all things like that. Even in the whole construction process, the different things you need to know about construction, because you know the way our industry is currently is that okay, it's getting more and more formal, but in the previous days, in the former years, it was kind of very, very informal. Just that you know, you wake up one day and you say, I want to build a house, I have the money, so you just get a builder and you tell them, I need a house like this with this number of bedrooms. Then they go on the ground and then they basically do some measurements here and there, then they build the house and it's up, you know. They never really care about the different processes that are actually involved in building and putting up all this project together. That's why you see most of the houses that were built earlier on, they have issues of, you know, things like building walls, or maybe the natural lighting is not good, or maybe this is like that, this is like that. Many people are really living in houses, but they're not like very comfortable with them, but they just say, this is what we have, so let's just live in it, okay? So we're going to be discussing everything that you need to know. Or some people even started their projects and then projects became too expensive, and then you find some houses are not complete, or someone lost the morale along the way, or someone is living in a house but they're not really comfortable because it's not as beautiful as they want it to be. So in this series, we are going to basically be breaking down as much information as possible, the different information that you need for every stage of the construction. And this time we are going to begin with choosing the land in the first place. So some of you might be wondering why we are choosing to talk about land in the first place. This is because land is a very big factor in determining how much your project is going to cost you at the end of the day, and how the project will come out at the end of the day. Now for land, we are literally going to talk about two things. The first one is actually the shape of the land. When you are buying land, it is important for people to always be careful about the shape of land you are buying. So let me give you this live example, okay? Just like you can see on my screen, we have literally 4 plots. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 plots. Now if you have to measure them in terms of the square footage, they are all 12.5 decimals, okay? But you can see, since they are different shapes, when you're designing for areas like this, you have to literally the shape of the land literally is a very big factor in how the space is actually being utilized. So we are going to start from the first one and go towards the last one and see what advantages we actually have with mainly at the first one, okay? So if I zoom into this first one, like you can see, we have about 50 feet here, and then we have 100 feet here. That is 15 meters by 30 meters. So you can see in this one, we literally have a parking for about 4 cars. We have a good compound, and we have fairly enough space at the back that we can use for having probably a tank stand here. And we have just a regular shape compound where you can actually have parties and all that, okay? And cars can easily navigate from the compound and reverse to the outside. This is literally the entrance. Then going on to the next example, you can see the plot is actually the same size, but it's actually shared, so it's kind of a parallelogram. Okay, so as you can see, we are using the same house. Not that houses literally have to be this size, this shape, but we are using this for purposes of illustration. So we have this house here. You can see it has actually comfortably sat here, but you can see the edges are almost knocking the edges of the plot. And also we have some space here, but it's of course a bit triangular and there's not much you can do with it, but we can still have a tank stand there. Then you can see the compound itself, it has reduced in terms of size and in terms of orientation, as opposed to this first one, which is big and regular. Okay, then you can see the parking. However much you put 4 cars here in the parking, the navigation is not that comfortable because the space between cars has actually reduced. In this scenario where we have 5 meters, in this scenario we have about 4.5 meters, 4.3 meters. Okay, so it may not be comfortable for a guy who has parked, for example, here to easily reverse out of the gate without making multiple turns before they can comfortably get out of the gate and use the road. Okay, then going to the next plot, you can see it gets even worse and worse. You see the compound is there, the same size in terms of square footage. The compound is actually there, but because it is scattered all over, it's difficult to hold something like a function there or have like a functional greenery in this area. And you can see, because we already have a lot of space left in the back of the house, because if we literally push this building to the back, it will knock the edge here, and so it will not be able to fit there comfortably. Of course, this can be countered by usually choosing a different shape of house that can literally fit here, but you know, you'll be having a lot of corners on the house, which in the long run in terms of construction can still cost you a lot and might not 100% solve the issue of having a regular compound. You can see we can only have 3 cars here comfortably. We could also have another car here, but the navigation of how the car reverses from here, you know, to pass through the gate or to navigate in the compound becomes even more and more difficult. Then going to the last example, you see things get even worse and worse. The square footage is actually the same, but the shape of the land has changed a lot, so we cannot have a lot of functional parking area and basically things like that. You can see we have literally a lot of space at the back of the plot, but there's not much you can do with it. You can't literally even put a house here for the maids or something, you know, because you can see the plot is irregular. Okay, so that is very important. And then the second issue that you need to think about when you're actually talking about the land is the terrain of the land. So unless you are really willing to spend like a very wealthy man, it is important that you avoid lands that are very, very steep. Okay, because if you have a land that is very steep, that is like on a hill, just the amount of money that you put in building those retaining walls, in planning for the drainage, in doing the excavations and leveling the land and grading it, by the time, let's say you just have a standard 50 by 100 or just 100 by 100, by the time even are done with just grading the land and building the retaining wall just to have the structure ready, you're already close into 30 million worth of money. You haven't even done anything on the ground regarding the house. Okay, so it's very important, if you're choosing land, you're better off choosing fairly flat land. I know the broker is going to tell you, you know, you have a very nice view of the estates, you have a nice view of the valley, you have a nice view of this, you know, but remember, to reach up to that, there's a huge amount of money that goes into planning for that, and also a huge amount of money that goes into actualizing that, until you now begin the construction and you see a lot of money is going into grading and retaining walls, and the building is not yet up. So that's very sensitive. So when you're going to buy land, if you are on budget, if you're on a budget, it is important that you choose land that is fairly flat. That will save you a lot of money in construction than if you have a land that is very, very hilly. Okay, so there are many more issues to discuss. Of course, after now you have the land in place, I'm not going to go into the legal aspects of verifying that the land is in proper channels and all that, because there are also scenarios where people just you begin to do the construction, then someone comes and starts claiming that the land was falsely sold to you, that you are defrauded and things like that. But that is not my part to discuss. Probably that's for the lawyers and all that. But now, after all that has been selected, there are many more things to do with the plan. And so in the next video, we are going to be discussing the next step, which is actually having the building plans for the house, having the proper building plans for the house. Okay, because I've seen people having, building plans here and there, and then when you begin to construct, someone literally raises the shell of the building, and then they get someone to do the finishing, and they have no idea of how the house is supposed to look at the end of the day. I mean, this is one of the most interesting things I've come across in the construction industry. Like, someone just raises the shell of the house, and then they say now it's time to beautify the house. I mean, beauty does not just come from the finishing, it comes from the design as well, okay? So it's important when you're having the architecture design, you're having the design of the house, you must have a clear picture of what the house is going to look like at the end of the day. Yeah, you must have a clear artistic impression of how the house is meant to be at the end of the day. I mean, even the artisans, the craftsmen, the builders and the masons who are doing it, it acts as a guiding light for people to actually follow, to have a vision of the end of the building before they even start the construction. Okay, guys, this is very, very important. Anyway, I'm not going to waste a lot of time on that, but in the next videos we're going to be discussing everything in a lot of detail, including the different materials you need to choose, why you need to choose certain materials and why you shouldn't be using certain materials, and also there are a lot of narratives that have prevailed over a long period of time. Okay, so these are narratives like things to do with DPC, things to do with hardcore, because some of these things are not really needed in certain areas, but because that's how it has been done before, people still carry it on without questioning whether it's really still necessary or it's not necessary. So some people end up spending a lot of money than they should actually have been spending, just because they're doing something that has been done over and over again. Okay, so we are going to be discussing all these things in detail. Otherwise, thank you very much guys for watching, and have yourself a good time. I'm DaWinmôi.